So this evening, I'd like to discuss the idea, the building of a rule of life. And sometimes people get scared of the term rule of life. Um, and so I'll often use an expression of a rhythm of life because we think of rules in terms of law or regulation, but rule actually comes from a Latin word, and um, it actually points to direction, to rhythm. And so a rule of life is a direction for our life. And so it's a way to order our lives. Again, even as we were praying earlier, that we wouldn't be come under our circumstances, that we would learn how to order our lives in reference to our circumstances. And so the idea of a rule of life is often pointed to Saint Benedict, or actually his name is Benedict de Nursia, of Nursia, um, later or most often referred to as Saint Benedict. And he lived between 480 and 547, so in the 6th century. And so this was a long time ago. And he was growing in depth in faith. And so everybody said you ought to go to like seminary. And he went and he was just not happy with the quality of life, with the depth of faith. And so he left Rome and he went a few miles away, not a long ways away, and actually lived in a cave for 3 years. And people would come to visit every once in a while. But during that time, everyone saw that he was growing in a kind of wisdom about things of heaven, but about relationships. He was just growing in deep ways. And so they begged him, a number of groups begged him to be their abbot or their pastor in our language, or the rector or whatever. And he finally gave in to one and said, okay, I'll serve in that capacity. But why he didn't want to was he had a lot of kind of like rhythm in his life and what he thought the Christian life should look like. And he said, I don't know that you all really want this. Just like a congregation may be calling a pastor that, oh, we want it, we want it. Well, not only did they not want it, they tried to kill him twice. And first, they tried to kill him by putting a poison into his drink. And the interesting thing is, then when he prayed and blessed the drink and thanked God for it before he drank from it, it exploded. Then, I don't know, a few weeks or a few months later, they tried to poison his bread. And when he gave thanks for the bread, a big crow came and took the bread away. And those who realized what was going on, the plot kind of beneath the plot, uh, stopped. He left. He realized he wasn't going to be able to do this very well, that people didn't really like what he was doing. So he developed these kind of communities of monks, and he developed 12 of them. And the monks all operated by rules of life, but it was a corporate rule. And the corporate rule often had to do, it had really two characteristics, and they were spiritual things and they were administration things. Um, and so in the spiritual things, any gathering or community of monks was really known for its in asceticism and being difficult and fasting and being difficult on their bodies. But his uh, rule was known for having a kind of moderate asceticism, that he was much more rounded in his approach, both spiritually and then in how to run the thing, the administration of things. So it was primarily, though, a corporate rule of life. And there are two kinds of rules of life these days. There's either corporate ones or private ones or personal ones. The corporate ones, where actually most of us, pretty much everybody's involved in corporate rules of life. We just don't recognize it. And rules of life are expected ways of behaving. And that, so in a church, a rule of life could be we gather on Sundays. When we gather, we sing songs. We may take communion every week or once a month. It has these kind of like regular activities that are part of our corporate life together. Could be that we have an annual meeting, that we have congregational meetings, that we meet on Sundays and in a small group or on Wednesdays or whatever. So churches have rules of life. Businesses, it's kind of the culture. This is how we do business. We show up at this time, we leave at this time. We take days off. This is the way we relate to clients. Families have rules of life. How we handle visitors. Do we eat together? Do we eat together for all 3 meals a week? Do we eat together for 2? What's expected at meals? What's expected around the morning? All those things that become expectations corporately are, in a sense, corporate rules of life. They can be intentional or they can just kind of form. A personal rule of life is, and all those things actually have them in both way, just like Saint Benedict had kind of a related to spiritual things and administrative, how we do things. In the family, the same thing. In your personal life, same kind of thing. But it's for you. And so that's what I'd like to discuss tonight. I'd like to read the message at Romans. I'm often amazed at what Eugene Peterson did in his uh, thoughts. It's really a one-volume commentary. We'd say it's a translation, but it's a paraphrase, or which is more difficult than a commentary. He has to determine what he thinks something means and express it in a way that means it really clearly. I think he did a great job with these verses. And it might be too much for you to read, but just listen as I read it. So here's what I want you to do. This is the Apostle Paul writing to the church in Rome. Here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. And that's really, that kind of mindset is what we want to have as kind of the reason for a rule of life. But let's consider a little bit more. So some of the reasons to have rule of life are just the anxiety that's rampant in the land. We need a rhythm so that we would not fall under anxiety all around us. There's insidious busyness. Insidious means it sneaks in malevolently. That busyness as a lifestyle sneaks in, and I say insidious or malevolent because when that busyness is keeping you from doing what you believe God wants you to do, there's a force involved. There's a force behind it. But it's everywhere. Busyness is the way most of us live. But as Christian leaders, and that's who I want to build you to be and us all to be, we need to address the epidemic of insidious busyness and work towards a countercultural, a counterintuitive, and sometimes what feels like counterproductive lifestyle that feeds your soul and leads you and me into humility, obedience, and prayerfulness. Those things don't just happen. None of those happen. They're all part of an intentional way of living. And it requires some pulling back. Having a personal rule of life it helps you or encourages you and me to have intentional patterns of how we live, of when we give up, when we get up, what we do, how we approach the Lord, how we approach our health or our stillness or the condition of our soul. So it's an intentional way of looking at our lives. Sometimes people are freaked by the idea and back off right away and say, I can't do it. Oh, not a wise move. I'm telling you, there is gold in the hills of learning how to develop an intentional lifestyle. How intentional? It's up to you. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. Nobody cares. But I want to tell you, it's good for you to care, and it's good for you to care before God and experience His care. What will you do today that will nurture your relationship with God? What can we do together? Those are the kinds of things that really are what a rule of life is about. Here's a definition that we'll unpack a little bit. This again is really related to module 4 of the curriculum. That's what the curriculum's all about. It's developing this rhythm of life in module 4. Your personal rule of life is a holistic description of the spirit-empowered rhythms and relationships that create, redeem, sustain, and transform the life God invites you to humbly fulfill for Christ's glory. It's a holistic description. It's not just about prayer and reading scripture. That's part of it, but it's about your whole life. It's a holistic description of spirit-empowered rhythms, not empty rhythms, not stuff by rote. No, the rhythms that you want and that you're wanting to encounter God in and through them. The rhythms and relationships. So you're being aware of them. That's why it comes up as module 4, that it has to do with your design and has to do with your placement, has to do with your sense of purpose. All this works together in how you're going to govern your life and intentionally. And a rule of life can help that process, can help you to create or redeem, buy back what's out of whack, or to sustain what God has, or to cooperate with His transforming power into the life that God invites you to humbly fulfill in Christ. So it's not lifeless, it's life-filled. You're the one positioning yourself to receive the life of God. That positioning is intentional. A rule of life really describes the positioning. That's primarily what it does. Even without articulating it, people basically have one. But an intentional rule of life equips us to maintain kind of boundaries, what we want, to help us with our God-given call, our uniqueness. It's intentionally guarding, building, growing who we are in God. So it can be most helpful at particular times in life, specifically when you're in kind of a time of life, like many of my clients, where you're in transition. And so it helps you to root yourself, to reroot yourself, or maybe to deepen the roots of your life. It's interesting, even as I say that, and I realized, like, last night, early this morning, I was having a kind of in that half dream state. And I was seeing myself, actually my wife and myself, as seeds that have been blown to this area of Richmond, but have not yet. It's like we've started to germinate to the degree that you can see the roots coming out of us, but they're not running deeply into the soil yet. And that's part of that rootedness. The rule of life helps you to deepen your rootedness in the Lord. And to help you express who you are, to live out your calling, and to direct you, giving you a path of what you discovering, what you're becoming, and help you to record it. You're seeing it, you're checking in on it. Again, whether that's monthly or quarterly or at least yearly, checking in on what he's building, how you're doing in relation to health or finance or relationships or your roles or your workplace. All those things relate to your rule of life. They help you discern what you need to refine and focus on, help build priorities. So here's just another kind of an image that is bigger than rule of life, but it can help you with just the overall picture that our lives are full of things, coming into our lives. And so we want to discern what God's doing, what his work is around our life. What things what things are God using to develop or to build us in his kingdom? So that's all coming in. We're wanting to discern it. Some of that has to recognizing his call, our sense of purpose, what he wants to use us for. And we recognize again, as the curriculum brings up, our placement. So things are being honed in. There's this general stuff going on in life, and we're discerning our call, we're recognizing our placement, and we're starting to recognize our assignment, our sense of purpose, our unique assignments related to that placement. And we're taking into account our uniqueness. Nobody's rule of life in a personal realm is going to look just like somebody else's, because their gifts, their abilities, their personality are going to be different. We want to steward those things with particular practices, whether those are daily or weekly or monthly. We've talked bits about that. It could be that, again, if who you are gifting wise has a prophetic edge of social justice, you're designed by God to fight the good fight. If you don't position yourself to fight the good fight, you will fight bad fights, and you'll pick on people, maybe bully people, so your unique design and gifting is going to lead to unique practices. I was interviewing somebody recently for a podcast that may come out. We're discerning it. But that person is a social justice just animal. And no matter what's going down, she's involved often in some kind of protest or whatever. My nature, I don't do that. Our giftings are different. Our calls are different. So as we're clarifying that uniqueness, it's important. And we're starting out of that space. All those levels of clarity. Now we're developing our unique rule of life that is life-giving, that is inviting us into growth in who God's made us to be. And we develop a focused life. Doesn't have to be complicated. As you get to that module 4, I point you to a website that has different kinds of rules of life, and they can be very simple or creative looking. Again, it depends on what you're like, or they can be pretty kind of PowerPoint looking. That's not the word that I want. Like organizing data. I can't think of the word that I want in relation to that. So you want to consider your design and your roles and your sense of vision and what God has you emphasizing or doing in life as mission at this point. And you're considering daily, weekly, monthly, and you're considering these different realms of your life. As I do this in a quick fashion, it can seem way overbearing or too much to do, but I want to encourage you, it doesn't have to be. And so as you're developing a personal way of life, here's a few things to think about. If you're a note taker, here's what to do. It needs to be life-giving. You move into it gently. You're not setting up rules that are going to be striving to make, that you feel behind, that you're wearing out on. That's not a rule of life. That's not a healthy rule of life. And that's what most people do. They put too much into the rule of life. So start small, be gentle, look for things that are life-giving. If taking walks is really life-giving to you, do that. Put that in there. If going to the ocean once a month is, or once a quarter, or once a year, whatever those things are, you're starting to just jot down the things that are life-giving for you. Craft your statements in ways that bring you joy, make you come alive. When I was working with some man, probably now somewhere between, probably about 15 years ago now, he was a pastor, and he came to me, the rule of life, and it had like 10 statements, and all of them started with, I should do this thing. And I was just worn. By the end of his list, I was so drained. I said, I can't even describe how worn that makes me feel just to listen to it. You got to change the language of that stuff. He worked with it, came back with something that was pretty inspiring. Be open to revising it just even as he did, and reviewing it, refining it until it fits, till it makes you feel good of how you go about your life. What measure of intentionality works for you? You're going to read scripture? How often? You're going to pray? How often? And what kinds of forms? How is it going to involve how you manage money? How do you manage money in a way that's before God? Are you winging it? Relationships. Ask for feedback from friends or spiritual community so that you can get good insights. Don't feel like you make it in your own and that you're behind or you're under it, or no, you can involve others and say, gosh, do you do this? How's this working for you? What kinds of things do you do? Here's what I'm thinking. Does that seem like it fits me? Does it sound life-giving even when I describe the practices? Prayerfully live out your rule. Seek God's direction for the future, and just keep moving in that direction. As you do it, the place to start is usually, it's not the only way, but usually get some space, whether it's a Saturday morning or it's taking a day off or whatever. Get some time to really think about who you're becoming in God and what it would look like. What would the practices look like that would be supportive to what you're wanting to be? Another way to do it is just go after little bits on a daily or weekly basis, just because you're not in a rush, you're working in a direction. I just want to encourage you, follow through with it, and follow through with it to a point that you're actually using it also. I did this for a number of years with seminarians and they loved it. But as I checked in with them a few years later, they kind of forgot about it. And when I would say, well, how's your rule of life doing? Have you made changes to it? Have you needed to? And they'd be like, oh, no wonder my soul's getting dry. As you develop it, again, nobody else is going to even know or monitor what you're doing. But as you do that, as you know, and you monitor and you change, it can be life-giving and you can change it according to your needs, your yearnings. Give voice to what you're learning to do. And be open to listening and reflecting with spiritual friends about it so that you can edit or revise it. You could ask somebody, can we grab a cup of coffee? And what I'd like to do this time, I've developed this kind of rule of life of how I operate and stuff. I'd love to get some feedback from you to see what you think of how it fits me. That may feel like it's self-oriented, but it is. It's you orienting yourself and inviting somebody into the building of your soul. That's an intimate space. And when you're reviewing it, you first want to say, is this thing working for me? It might not be working yet. It still is right. I'm just not giving it priority or whatever. Is this right for me? Does it feel like healthy? Is it life-giving and kind of a balance? Are they seeing me as a growing person in a rounded kind of way? What's missing? What do I need to add? Is fasting in there? Do I want it in there? What would it look like? Do I want to put it in there for a month and see whatever that is? Or, there've been stages. I'm picking up another form of fasting that I haven't done for a while, of doing some 3-day fasts. Spoken to somebody who's been in the program and finished a couple years ago, and they're in a kind of like in the kind of early stages of their Christian faith, but they've been involved in some other kind of stuff. And they're saying, well, they have a plan. They're wanting to do a 15-day fast in December, and their prayer is to a year from December to do a 40-day fast. Again, that's where they're going. Could be that you want to do a fast of a partial day a week or whatever. Is that part of it? Is giving part of it? Is exercise part of your rule of life? What adjustments do you need to make? So when I was doing quarterly kind of spiritual retreats with people, we would bring our rules of life and we would update them in each quarter. And so I had this kind of document, a Word doc that I would each quarter, I would write in my handwriting what things were being highlighted, what things did I need to change. And so over a few years, it was very interesting to see how shifts would happen. Get these once a quarter snapshot. Does it fit where you are? One of the things that's difficult if you is to operate well in a rule of life in a culture that doesn't have anything even close to it. And as I've mentioned, and if you're in Israel, if you're particularly in Jerusalem, Sabbath is not difficult to practice because everything closes. Friday night gets to be dusk. The train closes, shops close. There's party at the Western Wall, dancing, praying. That's a weekly rhythm. That makes that a lot easier than in a country where we are, where everybody works at different times. And so in your community or your church or your family, does your rule of life fit? If it doesn't, it makes it a lot more difficult.